Anyway, I'll start off. You probably don't need the slides, but I'm Adam Donnison. I used to work for MySQL AB when it was a Swedish company, and then it was part of an American company, and then it was part of a bigger American company. During that time, we found that, well, one of the things that happened with the Oracle takeover was that there was a justifiable concern within the community. There was also concern within the company itself as to the future of MySQL. But Oracle's effect on MySQL started much earlier than that. Now, Oracle got involved, if you like, in MySQL when they first bought InnoBase, which was the manufacturer or the developers of the InnoDB database engine. Now, that occurred just shortly before I started the company more than 6 years ago. What that triggered was an internal review of the vulnerabilities that we had to external sources. So InnoDB being one of those. Now that had some positive, but it also had some negative changes or negative effects to the way that the company worked, and also to the product in general. One of the positives was that it spurred the development of the pluggable storage engine, which was an idea that actually has come a long way, and it's meant that we have this, this core, if you like, that has allowed easily forked products to replace components that we don't need or that we would rather not have as proprietary. Now, Oracle went on to then buy the only other storage engine that provided transactions, which was when they bought SleepyCat the following year, and the Berkeley DB engine. Now, luckily most people seriously using MySQL didn't use the Berkeley DB engine, so it wasn't seen as a major stumbling block to MySQL, but it was actually seen in the community as yet another attempt by Oracle to try and shut down the MySQL as competitors. Now, if you ask Larry Ellison, MySQL has never been a competitor to Oracle. Not only that, MySQL is not the world's most widely used open source database. Who here uses MySQL? Okay, that's about 80%. Who uses Postgres? It's about 50%. Who uses Berkeley DB? It's about 45, 50%. Who uses Oracle? That's about 2 people. Right.
Thanks, Andy.
Now, the point being that Larry Ellison, in his speech justifying the purchase of Sun as not being an attempt to take over MySQL, was that Berkeley DB is the biggest open source database. Technically, maybe he's correct. But, you know, I don't see Berkeley DB taking the place of MySQL or PostgreSQL or Oracle anytime soon. So there's a bit of FUD in there, and that's part of the problem, is that we have this situation where there's lots of FUD. But along with the forking, what happened when Oracle then purchased the company is that we had this immediate split of people starting to want to fork MySQL. Much the same happened with the 2 other key open source projects, well, 3 other in fact, but only 2 others that I know of that have actually forked. And that's things like OpenOffice, where they've gone on to LibreOffice, and the Hudson project. Those caused massive problems within the community, but the community resolved the problem by forking. we have the same situation with MySQL. Luckily, there are a number of people that have already started forking the project. Along with that, there is a fork of companies, if you like. Percona, for instance, started off when Peter Zaitsev left MySQL in 2006, was it? And started Percona. You've then had Arjen Lentz, started OpenQuery, and another ex-MySQLer. In fact, proudly touts himself as being employee number 25, is it? Well, I was employee number 250 something. Does that make me 10 times better or 10 times worse? No, let's not go there. Of course, Monty Vadonis went out, Monty Program, that's where we get MariaDB from. So we now have companies as well as products that have forked as a result of, well, not necessarily as a result of the direct Oracle purchase, but that have been enabled by Oracle's actions in the past. So we've got choices, which is wonderful. We've also got some interesting things happening in that space. For instance, Oracle have now, in their 5.6 release, are starting to look at getting a lot of performance improvements into the system. Percona just recently announced a cluster version based upon Galera, and renowned for performance fixes to the product. Monty Program have also incorporated performance fixes, and a lot of the Monty Program developers were part of the Query Optimizer team. So, you know, I'd expect to see more happening in that space as well. So, what I expect to see in the next 12, 24 months is an arms race, if you like, between Oracle, Percona, and Monty Program to start off with, in terms of getting features in, replacing proprietary features. Now, Monty Program's already, and I think Percona have as well, have got a PAM plugin, have they, Stuart? Yeah, so we're already replacing bits and pieces that Oracle are trying to close source. Great win, great stuff. And that will only continue. And the more Oracle try and step in the way, the more there will be that resistance, and the more that the community will reach out and look for alternatives to Oracle. Now, does this matter in the business world? Well, the business world tends to want to have an arse to kick. I mean, they tend to want to have somebody who they can ring up and say, my system doesn't work, it's your problem, make it work. And that's where that forking of companies comes in. We now have a number of companies out there. As I said, Arjen's OpenQuery, Percona, Monty Program currently don't have their own support, but in steps a company called SkySQL. SkySQL currently have just over 95% of the employees in SkySQL are ex-MySQLers. So it's effectively the old MySQL moved sideways in some respects. There are some differences. We won't, what SkySQL are now doing is, and I have to talk about them seeing as they paid my way here, so, you know, excuse me if I do that, but SkySQL actually provide first and second level support for MySQL database, and bug fixes are provided through Monty Program as a third level support. So we've got the situation covered in that way. But interestingly, that's not the end of the story. Now, Percona also provides support, and they also provide training services. OpenQuery provide training services and consulting. So there's a plethora of options available to you. What also is coming out is that in the community and also other businesses are starting to build, well, have over a long period of time, built add-ons for MySQL, including companies like Continuant with their Tungsten replicator, companies like ScaleDB, you know, InfiniBand from, you've got, you know, pick a number of companies. There are literally dozens of them out there. In terms of high availability, there's things like the Master High Availability Toolkit from Yoshinori Matsunobu, and he's put that up fairly recently, which is an interesting thing. There's the multi-master MMM thing from, what's that called? Yeah, well, it's a Percona actually supported, so there's that one. I'm glad you can't remember it, Stu.
MMM has nothing to do with Percona, right?
I thought they had No?
No. MMM doesn't come out of Percona.
No, I didn't say that.
Percona Replication Manager is a pacemaker plugin that's specifically designed to replace MMM.
Ah, right. Well, I did notice that they had, when I was researching some of this, that they had MMM somewhere on their website, so I may have got confused there. So
they still mention it in the context of we hit it.
They mention a lot of things in that context.
It's mainly to tell people not to use it.
Still, so my point is basic. Well, if there is a point to this discussion, is that there are choices out there and there are companies to watch. Now, particularly, you look at things like Percona has now got Stuart Smith, who is Director of Server Technology, is it? Yep. Ex-MySQL, worked on the cluster, worked on Drizzle. So you're starting to see some interesting exfiltration from the original MySQL into these companies. SkySQL was started by Ulf Sandberg. Kai Arnaud, who was the head of community, is now is now in SkySQL. Giuseppe Maggia took his place in MySQL, is now over at Continuant. So you're starting to see this exfiltration. You're starting to see a lot of options available. And I really think that this is going to be an exciting space to look at in the coming years, because that sort of competition is only going to be good for the product and good for those that require support from the product. Already, when Sun took over MySQL, one of their sales tactics was to send their salespeople into sites and say, just tell Oracle you're talking to us and you'll get discounts from them. And it worked. It was actually a good technique. You didn't even have to install MySQL for the Oracle sales team to start to get a bit nervous once Sun had taken over, because Sun had that ability to walk into the bigger accounts. But now Oracle has taken over, and their thing is, well, you've got an Oracle support contract. Hey, guess what? That now covers you for your MySQL services. So there's swings and roundabouts on that stuff. But if you're coming into MySQL and you go to Oracle and you say, hey, this is great, I want to buy Oracle support, they treat you no differently to if you're running Oracle Enterprise, whatever. So you're in that same brand. There is no difference in their support. There is no differentiation. Everything is the same level of support, which is good for some companies. But other companies are looking for a point of differentiation, and that's where some of I was going to call them smaller, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily a good way of describing it. The alternative companies that are out there are really good value for money. And they're always going to be good value for money because they do not want Oracle to take money away from them. I did have more. It's on the slides. Can't get the bloody thing working. So if anybody's got any questions at this point, go for it.
Questions, anybody?
Comments?
Suggestions?
I'm also an orchardist, cider maker, poultry farmer, and what else do I do? So if there's any questions on any of that.
I have chickens too.
Have you?
Okay, Perry.
Made a nice Nashi Perry the other year. It was,
Did you find it too sweet?
no, I ferment to dryness, so.
Okay.
Well, it looks like the shortest talk on the...
So,
I noticed that people are taking the opportunity to take a nap. That's good.
there's always one in the afternoon. So morning tea. Kill me. Afternoon tea is meant to be scheduled for about 10 minutes from now. So